Hello, everyone. So my name is Dr. Mayenaaz Sidhu. I am the first author of our newly published article in GIE entitled The Incremental Benefit of Chromoendoscopy in addition to high definition white light and narrowband imaging for the detection of submucosal invasion. So in this author interview, we're just going to go through a little bit about the background behind this study and also why we think this study is important, as well as discussing the outcomes from the study and some future directions. So the study was initially conceptualized essentially because of the paucity of data that essentially compares traditional or dye-based chromoendoscopy for assessing for submucosal invasion in large non-pedunculated colorectal lesions, especially with the advent of the newer technology endoscopes that are widely available in both Western and certainly, obviously, in the Eastern countries. So, with the advent of narrowband with filters, such as narrowband imaging from Olympus, we do think that potentially there has been a shift in the ability to optically evaluate the degree of areas of concern when assessing a lesion. We would just like to highlight that it is one of the most critical things in determining not only the suitability of endoscopic resection for certain lesions, but also the type of endoscopic resection, whether that be an en bloc approach, such as with en bloc EMR or endoscopic submucosal dissection, as compared to piecemeal resection. So essentially, this brought about the idea that we do not actually think that, given the advent of these new technologies, that the traditional dye-based chromoendoscopy evaluation that essentially formed a lot of the optical classifications from several decades ago, they probably would with the newer technologies, they will probably be equal on an equal pegging, especially for optical evaluation. So the main aims of our study, so the primary aim was essentially to assess whether the ability of simply the high definition white light and narrowband imaging to assess for deep invasion or submucosal invasive cancer, and then also whether or not the dye-based chromoendoscopy provided any incremental benefit. In addition, we had two independent observers that were involved with each lesion, and it was primarily to assess the agreement between these two observers, which were both blinded to each other's assessment before and after chromoendoscopy. So the main outcome from our study was that assessment for areas of submucosal invasion, which we essentially determined by the presence of an area of demarcation on the surface of the lesions. This is an important principle that has been previously mentioned and briefly published in literature. Essentially, what we're assessing is an area of either a disrupted pit or microvascular pattern on the surface of a lesion that allows us a clear target for evaluating, especially on a large laterally spreading lesion, a clear target for a detailed endoscopic evaluation. So essentially, in terms of the main outcome from this study, that we found that the absence of a area of demarcation had a very high negative predictive value for the absence of submucosal invasion. As such, these lesions essentially can then be treated with piecemeal resection safely when performed or when assessing the suitability of their endoscopic resection. Most importantly, the impact of assessment of SMIC was there was no benefit gained from dye-based chromoendoscopy, with the negative predictive values not changing at all between the two approaches. Further to that, we found a very high rate of inter-observer agreement between the two blinded observers amongst over the multiple endoscopists involved in the study, all of which are either advanced endoscopy consultants trained in tissue resection or senior consultants and attendings. The kappa values were very high between the two observers, above zero point 0.9 and again that was independent of dye-based chromoendoscopy. This is a particularly important finding because in this study there were multiple observers, and hence by a high rate of agreement would therefore put greater credence on the outcome of the main outcome, which is the assessment for SMIC with optical evaluation. So in terms of future directions, I mean, this study was a single center experience amongst a group of expert endoscopists. So it is something that we would like to see replicated amongst other expert centers internationally as part of potentially a multi-center trial. In addition to that, given the widespread adoption of EMR now, sort of extending towards or outside of expert centers, potentially this could be further replicated in less expert or tertiary facilities, specifically for EMR. Further to this, we would like to mention that with the increasing introduction of artificial intelligence technologies, that may be another avenue of research extending our work here. Certainly, there currently isn't any data on assessing lesions or large lateral-spreading lesions for features of SMIC. And although we do not think the technology is quite there yet, that may be another avenue for research. So thank you again to the GIE team, the entire editorial office, for allowing us to be part of this author series. If any of the readership have any further questions, we'd be happy to answer them. But again, thanking them again for actually allowing us to publish this important work.